Hello, geographers. Hopefully, yesterday you were able to read a little bit about the different religions that started and dominate the Middle East. Today, we're going to talk more about some of those religions, but more of the ethnic groups and some of the very basics, a lot of the terms that you might hear discussing the Middle East. Just a review from some of the things we talked about or I mentioned in that video yesterday. The Middle East is a vernacular region, all right, and it could be one shared characteristic could make up this region. So definitely, people, it's a point of view, and people could argue about which countries belong in the Middle East and which ones do not. Some people might say that, hey, Afghanistan does not belong in the Middle East. The people there's a few different Afghani ethnic groups. Um, what does Afghan have that maybe makes them part of the Middle East? Well, Islam is the dominant religion in Afghanistan. Now, Pakistan, also very Islamic, dominant religion in Pakistan. People don't consider Pakistan to be part of the Middle East most of the time. They're tied more in with India and Southeast Asia, Southern Asia. So, kind of interesting where you draw the line. Some people would say, no, Afghanistan, um, you know, you're not Arabic, you don't have oil, um, you're not part of the Middle East. Where you go into Northern Africa, these countries predominantly are Arabic. They speak Arabic. They have many of them have lots of oil as well, and so they usually get grouped in the Middle East as well. In the United States, when we think Middle East, our minds are immediately drawn to Iraq, where we fought two different wars now against Iraq. They're drawn to Iran. Now, differences between Iraq and Iran: if you're in Iraq, you're you're speaking Arabic. If you're in Iran, you're speaking Farsi, which is a Persian language. So um, two different ethnic groups there, yet similar religions, but two different branches a little bit. Turkey, they're going to speak Turkish. All right, so you're running into some different ethnic groups, but they're all part of the Middle East for various reasons. So, what is an ethnic group? Some of you might be sitting there thinking, okay, he's mentioning ethnic groups. Well, what is it? And it can be kind of hard to define, but it's a group of people who share a common history, culture, and or language. And basically, you are born into an ethnic group. All right. Your kids, grandkids, great grandkids could sometimes maybe merge into a new ethnic group down the line based on where you live. Um, I can trace my ancestors back to Germany, back to Norway, Sweden, um, Czech Republic, Bohemia, but I'm an American. It's one of the newest ethnic groups that's been created in the world, right? We kind of created it. What does it mean to be an American? We share a common history. You know, um, who was our first president? George Washington, right? Culture. We eat things like hot dogs and pizza, and it's a melting pot for sure. Um, but if we go back to places like Germany, well, there's people who, for 2,000 years, their family has lived in that region, and they've been speaking German for over 2,000 years. Or in Japan, they've been speaking Japanese for thousands of years, and they can go back generation after generation after generation and kind of trace their ancestry back to that ethnic group. And at a time when countries formed and each ethnic group got their own country, they named the country after their ethnic group. So there were German people long before there was ever a country called Germany. And when they finally formed a country called, and they needed to come up with a name for it, it was Germany. The Italians, we need a name for our country that finally formed. Well, the ethnic group that lives here are Italians. Same with Japan, same with Turkey. The Turks, long before there was ever a country called Turkey, there were Turkish groups of people. They spoke Turkish. And when it came time, when their empire that they grew, the Ottoman Empire, fell apart, What was left? Well, this country full of Turks, let's call it Turkey. Now you come over, to a new world over here where it's being created by explorers and created by colonists. Well, we have North America, South America that were named for explorer Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian map maker, and so they started referring to the place as America. Well, how about the people that lived here? Well, let's start calling them Americans. So we have people named after the place in the Western Hemisphere. Back in the Eastern Hemisphere, you have places named after the people. I know it's kind of confusing, but just think an ethnic group, you're born into it and raised into it. And like we just talked about on the last slide, in many instances, ethnic groups grow into nations. This area, there were Germans living in this pink area for thousands of years. Then they drew these imaginary lines in called borders, and boom, bada bing, bada boom, you've got a country that they decide to call Germany. Or those that you who have taken German, you know that the people in Germany call themselves Deutschlanders, and the people that live there call the country Deutschland, right? It was the Romans that called them the Germans, the Germanic people. How about Poland? For a long time, this area was ruled by different groups of people. But when they finally had a chance to become their own country, it became Poland, the land of the Poles. Down here, we have this pink area where German people live, but it's a different country than Germany. All right, they formed a different country. So you have Austria, which is full of German speakers. If you go to Austria, they don't speak Austrian, they speak German. Just like in the United States, we don't speak um, American or United Statesian, we speak English. Switzerland, same thing. You go to Switzerland, you're going to hear people speaking German. Um, I had a friend who went to Switzerland, foreign exchange student, or to study there abroad in college, and he ended up in a region over here in the blue area of Switzerland where they speak French. So we see this in a lot of different places where the people have always been there, and only recently they get their country named after them. Now, there's plenty of ethnic groups out there that don't have their own country. All right, we're going to talk about the Kurds in the Middle East. If you go to Southeast Asia, well, do the Vietnamese ethnic group, do they have a country? Yes, it's called Vietnam. Do the Laotians have a country of their own? Yes, it's called Laos. All right, the Thai people have Thailand. But what about the Hmong people? They are a stateless nation of people. They do not have their own country. So here's the different ethnic groups in the Middle East. We can look at, there are different groups of Arabs, there are different groups of Persians. The Persians are in the orange. There's even different groups of Kurds. All right, the Kurds are in the brown here. You can see the Kurds, who are a stateless nation. They're an ethnic group without their own country. All right, I did that spit test for Ancestry.com. You spit in a cup, you mail it in, you pay them like $50, and they mail you back where you're from or where your ancestors are from. There were no real surprises in my DNA test. I thought I was about 50% German because my grandpa on my Schenecker side is 100%. My grandpa on my mom's side, Schmidt, he was like 75% or something like that. So I really thought I was going to be mostly German. I wasn't. I was more Scandinavian, and that's just kind of how the DNA kind of matches, I guess they said. But so I am more Scandinavian than German, but I had like 20% German in me or something like that, and so, is there a place for me to go if I ever wanted to be amongst Germans? Yeah, I could go to Germany. Is there a place for me to go if I wanted to be amongst Norwegians? Yeah, I could go to Norway. If you're a Kurd, there really is no place that is dominated by Kurds. You're either in Syria, Turkey, Iraq, or Iran. If you're an Arab, there are different Arab countries that you can go to. And sometimes, the Kurds in Iraq are probably different than the Kurds in Syria, who are a little different than the Kurds in Turkey. Just like you have Palestinian Arabs who have fled Palestine and went to places like Syria and Jordan, Egypt, and they're Palestinian Arabs. different than the Egyptian Arabs and the Jordanian Arabs and the Syrian Arabs, but similar. And so we look at this, and there can be conflict caused because we're trying to mix these different ethnic groups together. Who drew these borders in is a big question that we'll talk about later. So here are some of the dominant basic ethnic groups of the Middle East. The first is Arab. All right. Well, what makes you an Arab? Because an ethnic group is not a race of people, right? It has nothing to do with your DNA. Basically, if you speak Arabic and you act Arabic and you're raised in that culture, you're an Arab, right? And a lot of times maybe your parents were Arabs or your grandparents were Arabs or your great grandparents were Arabs, right? And so you're born into that. And we see the yellow area here are the areas dominated by Arabs. How about in Egypt? There's all this area where it's just white and there's no yellow. Well, that's because it's desert and nobody lives there. And here's the Nile River, right? Denial. So there's lots of different Arabs throughout the Middle East. I think a lot of times we think Arabs have to be very dark skinned. And remember, Arab is not a race of people. So there's lighter skinned, darker skinned. It's an ethnic group. Are they speaking Arabic? Are they eating traditional Arabic foods? That type of thing. And even the foods can change, right? Because it's a globalized world, right? You look at the United States. What's American? Is it a hamburger or a hot dog, like German food? Is it a pizza or spaghetti, Italian food? Is it wontons? What is American? Is it sushi? Right? People are at Coburn's, or at least they were before the outbreak here, eating sushi like it was going out of style, right? And that's Japanese. So it's a globalized world, and things are certainly changing as far as like what makes an ethnic group. Here's our 2010 census. I guess I didn't look close enough at the 2020 census that I took. And it's asking some questions here. Please answer both. Question 5 about Hispanic origin, question 6 about race. So it's asking about your ancestry, and according to the U.S. Census Bureau, Arabs are counted as white. A person whose ancestors were indigenous to Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa is considered white for census purposes. In the world, there are about 100 million Arabs. Many people in the U.S. are part Arab or descendants of Arabs, and you probably don't even know. Can't remember this girl's name. She's on American Pie. She's Arab. Steve Jobs, was it part Arab? Doug Flutie, football player, part Arab. Selma Hayek, actress, part Arab. Vince Vaughn, either grandparents or great-grandparents are Arab from Lebanon. Somebody who's Arab can be any religion. I think oftentimes we think that people that are Arab have to be Islamic, and that's not true. There are Arabs in the Middle East that are Christians. There are Arabs in the Middle East that are Jewish. There are Arabs that are no religion at all. They don't believe in anything. All right. Now, why do we associate Arabs with Islam? Because most Arabs are Islamic in the Middle East, but not all. Another another Middle Eastern ethnic group are the Turks. The Turks have been around for thousands of years. Their language dates back to 600 BC. So people considered themselves to be Turkish in 600 BC, long before there was ever a country called Turkey. Right? But as this region forms and they have borders drawn in, they need to have a name for their country, and it becomes Turkey. The majority of people in Turkey are Turkish. But some of the Turkish people live in other surrounding countries, and they are minorities in that country. Some of them never moved. It's not like they immigrated there. That's just where the line got drawn in. Turkey, here's President, what's his name? Erdogan, and he's been doing some things that the United States we maybe disagree with a little bit, kind of becoming more of a dictator, the Vladimir Putin kind, where they keep having elections, and he's like, "Hey, look at me, I won again." And people that are speaking out against him, your freedom of speech people, some of them are ending up in prison, never to be heard from again, that type of thing. Here's the old Turkish Empire. At one point, Turkey conquered a lot of ground, northern Africa, all the way down to the through the Persian Gulf here, through the past the Red Sea, up here to the Black Sea, and all the way up into Europe. They had conquered places up into Hungary. Budapest was taken over, so they had a huge amount of land. Well, they kept losing land, losing land, losing land, and by World War One, they didn't have a whole lot left. Some places in northern Africa, some places in the Middle East, here in like um, Arabia, Iraq, those types of things, into Persia a little bit. And then after World War One, they lose, and they had sided with Germany and Austria and Hungary. They lose the war, and France and Great Britain kind of split up their empire. Enes Kanter, pro basketball player, you might have heard of Enes. He does not like this president. He even said he wasn't going to take a trip to England to play basketball because he thought they couldn't keep him safe, and this president might try to have him assassinated. The third ethnic group, Persian. It's a language and culture that originated in what is now Iran. Some of you might watch Shahs of Sunset. I think it's on like E or something like that. Basically, kind of a group of Persian real estate people, family. It's kind of a cheap knockoff of Who's Keeping Up with the Kardashian type of deal. I had a one year we're having a little trouble with Iran. Several years ago, I'm on a fishing trip. This old guy's talking about it, and he says, "I don't know why we don't bomb all those Arabs in Iran." And I was like, "Well, there's a problem with what you just said." And he looked at me like I was like he wanted to fight or whatever. And I said, "There aren't that many Arabs in Iran. There are Persians in Iran." And the guy looked at me and he was like, "What do you mean? They're all Arabs over there." And I'm like, "No, they don't speak Arabic. They speak Farsi. They're not Arabs. They're Persians." And he was just steaming mad in the boat. Anyway, then he got his line caught by the old the motor. The Kurds. This is a group that doesn't have their own country. The Turks have a country. The Arabs have multiple countries. The Persians and Iran have a country. The Kurds do not. They are a nation of people without a state. They are a stateless nation. And so, who are Kurds? Well, they speak Kurdish. They act Kurdish. They just don't have their own country. They're a minority group in all countries, and they've been mistreated in a lot of countries. So here you can kind of see where they live. Turkey does not like them. There's some confusing things about this as well where, all right, the Kurds and the US were fighting ISIS together and driving them out of parts of Syria and Iraq. And then as soon as like the fighting between like we kind of beat ISIS back, and Turkey decides to launch an attack and bomb the Kurds in Iraq and Syria. And we're like, why are you doing that? Well, they're worried that the Kurds that live here that have weapons are going to give those weapons to maybe some Kurdish terrorist groups that live in Turkey and want to hurt the Turkish government. And we're just like, oh man, what's going on? It's like when you have two friends, but you can't hang out with those friends at the same time because they don't like each other. Well, that's kind of the US. We are allies with Turkey. They're a democracy to some extent. And we're allies with the Kurds, but we can't be friends with them at the same time at the same place. So we weren't very happy that they bombed our friends, the Kurds. Our friend Turkey did. It's confusing stuff. Another ethnic group in the Middle East are the Jews. And the interesting thing about the Jews is they are both an ethnic group and a religion. So it's also confusing that I have no relation to anybody that's Jewish. I can't trace any ancestry back to the Middle East. But tomorrow, if I wanted to, I can convert to Judaism. That's what Rod Carew did, former twin. Hall of Fame baseball player. He married his wife and converted to Judaism. She is an ethnic Jew that can trace her ancestry all the way back to the Hebrews that lived in Israel and Jerusalem and that part of the world. So ethnic Jews can trace their ancestry back to the Hebrew people in the Middle East, where if you are just a religious Jew, you maybe can't. Now, some people might be an ethnic, Jewish person where they could spit in that ancestry.com cup. They could trace. They could say, "Yep, here we are. Where I can trace my ancestry back to the Hebrews from, thousands and thousands of years ago." But they might be a different religion or no religion at all. Here's the country of Israel, and this is the only country in the world where the majority of the people are Jewish. And here's their flag. Star of David on there, which is you read yesterday, is a symbol of Judaism. You can kind of see how it's broken up a little bit in these different countries. Turkey, what's the main ethnic group? Turkish, with some Kurds and others. Iran, mostly Persian, with a bunch of others and some Kurds. Iraq, mostly Arabic, with some Kurds and other. Syria, mostly Arabic, with some Kurds. Now let's take a look at the map. Basically, after World War I, when France and Great Britain take over this region, they draw in lines. And the lines basically are where they just feel like it. Maybe there's rivers there or mountains there, or just kind of equally proportioning it to see how it fits in. Maybe they promise certain groups of people land, that type of thing, and they draw the lines in. What they did not take any into account was where the different ethnic groups and different religions live. So you could be an Arab Muslim, but you might be an Arab Sunni Muslim or an Arab Shia Muslim. And now there could be some conflict, like we see in Iraq, because you have Sunni, Shia, and Kurds there. And they drew the lines in and they did not care. So they drew these lines in, and we're seeing a lot of ethnic conflict in a lot of these places. For instance, the fighting that was going on in Iraq, you have the Iranians supplying and giving weapons to the Shia Iraqis. And then you have over here the Arabs from Saudi Arabia supplying and giving weapons and money to the Sunni Arab Iraqis to fight. And so it's a bit, same thing's happening in Syria now. Same thing's happening in like Yemen now. And so you have these conflicts, these proxy wars going on over, between ethnic groups. So a guy decided, hey, what if we redrew the lines? This will never happen. But this is how he said we could have peace in the Middle East if we redraw the lines. And you look at some places, okay, Pakistan over here, are they winners or losers? Looks like they're losers. Pakistan isn't going to give up land, but you could have some more ethnic groups that, are more like the Afghanis, now part of Afghanistan. Free Baluchistan, I don't even know what that is. Iran or Persia, you can see they kind of shift. What happens over here? Well, Azerbaijan gains more land. Armenia, I don't know if Armenia gains land. Looks like they stay about the same. But the Kurds get a country of their own. Turkey's not going to be very happy. They lose a whole lot of their land over here. You got Mount Ararat there, where supposedly that is where Noah's Ark might be, up there somewhere. Syria loses some land. They're not going to be very happy. Iraq kind of becomes three places. Part of it goes to Kurdistan. Part of it goes to the Sunnis. Part of it goes to the Shia. Now, the problem over here is there's not a lot of water or oil in this part of where the Sunni Iraq would be. And the problem is with that is it would be a failed state. Jordan looks like they grow a little bit. And then down here, this is interesting. The two most holy cities to all Muslims are Mecca and Medina. And basically, right now they're controlled by Sunnis. And so the Sunnis from Saudi Arabia are in charge, and they can kind of do what they want. If they want to knock down an old Shia building there and build a 5-star hotel for the visitors, they can. And the Shia people in the world can't do anything about it. And so what they're saying, well, why don't we turn this into an Islamic sacred state where religious leaders maybe have control over these cities, both Sunni and Shia. I don't know how that's going to work out, but that was the idea. And so you can kind of just see how these places change a little bit. And this will never happen, but this was the idea that maybe if we would have allowed these countries to form on their own, maybe if Great Britain and France went to draw in so many lines, things would be better. All right. I think we're going to stop there today.